Okay.
Pierre Sinclair comes to us from the wilds of Western Canada, where he's working on and with an almost completed, fascinating project. The technology that he is working with, for instance, has fascinated David Adair, who you heard this morning. And David Adair has seen a lot of them. And he said to me in Tampa, he said, this is the first one that I've seen that will work. So you want to hear as much as you can about what Pierre is going to tell you. And if there's enough interest, we're going to consider, since he has to go back early and cannot give a workshop at the appointed hours, if there's enough people that want to stay awake tomorrow night, tonight. No, it's tonight. It's today. What day is today? It's tonight then. From about 9:30 to 1 o'clock, he'll do it. But I want you to be able to get up Sunday morning because you got some real stuff coming then too. Nevertheless, there's more. We'll talk about that a little more as we go along and see how awake you are. But for right now, let's welcome Pierre Sinclair with Anti-Gravitational Propulsion System Technology. I said it all right. Okay.
That's excellent, Dean. Dean, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pierre Sinclair, like Dean just said. Dean, thank you very much for inviting me again. This is wonderful. It's wonderful to be among a crowd like this. And it's wonderful also to tell you about the project I'm working on right now. Company I formed for this project is named Project Magnet. And that's in honor of Wilbert Smith, which is a person who lived in Canada, worked with the Canadian government on unusual propulsion system. This was paid by the Canadian government and also working with the US government at the time, 1960-70 experiments. I have a lot of stuff to show you. I just hope I'm going to be able to do all of this. Lots of slides. What I'd like to do is disconnect that light there. I understand that you need to film me, but the stuff is happening there, so whether you see my face or not is not really important. Is that you grab what I'm showing there. Another thing I want to do before I start, and I never did, I will keep forgetting, the granite man and the butterfly. Why we call the granite man and the butterfly is because the man we're talking about is David Hamill. He's a man that works with granite. He works with granite to build his machine. The machine he went in was made out of granite, and so that's why we have the granite man. And also the butterflies, because of the effect inside the machine, it looks like a butterfly. So that's why I call the book The Granite Man and the Butterfly. All the book is factual, so there's no fancy stuff in there. Though the picture looks fancy, this is an actual vision that was shown to him in his living room so that he could see and remember the motion inside the machine as he was building the machine. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, and it's because I have so much to say. This is a video that I've put together as well. We have a conference in Vernon, BC, the Science Center there in Vernon, BC. And also I have another one which is a Denver conference. And basically what it does, it covers the material I'll be covering here. The difference between the two tapes is one talks a little bit more about David, and the other one, and other researchers around the world that I found was doing very, very relative research to what I'm doing right now. And the other one basically deals a little bit more with the hardware. Okay, so let's hope that the slide projector will work well. Okay, so we're going to start with the first slide. Okay, can we dim the light a little more? Like, totally? Great. Thank you very much. This is, whoops, let's point the right way here. This is David Hamill and Nora, his wife. She's quadriplegic. She's been quadriplegic for 23 years. Nora's played a big role in David's life. First of all, she anchored David. That means that he couldn't go very far since he had to take care of her, and therefore he was home to do a lot of work. Now, why David Hamill, and not just me starting with the machine right away, is because the importance of this story. If you don't understand where the technology comes from, then I'm just another UFO buff that comes along with something that he thought was great. Well, no. This technology has history behind it. The history starts with David Hamill. And one night, David Hamill is sitting in front of his television, and then seemingly fall asleep. The television looks to him like it's going to snow. What he sees, two people coming out of the television screen. They appear beside him, people just like you and me. I've asked him over and over, but people just like you and me. And then these people said, well, look, David, would you like to come up? Would have something to show you? David's been in the war, as you're going to see in the book, if you order the book. And you'll see that he's not afraid of anything. So therefore, yeah, that's fine. I'll go up with you. And then so they said, well, you have the choice, of course. And then so as you go through the ceiling, David's checking out the insulation inside the attic there. And it shows, he says, geez, it's going down already. And so he doesn't make any fit about it. It just goes up into that machine. Now, the machine is a flying saucer. I'm sorry, but it is a flying saucer. And at this point, it is more like a spiritual experience than an actual physical experience. The difference is when he gets into the machine, he says that I felt exactly like you were going on a staircase. He says, I felt absolutely solid in 3 dimensions. The reason why I was there is so that they could show him exactly what the technology was that we would need to lift ourselves from the ground, not to go in space, anti-gravity to go into the air. And so, therefore, they said, well, David, now you have the possibility of doing that because of the form you're in. If you were physical, you couldn't go in between the objects that are forming the energy in this machine. So therefore, we're going to keep you in this form so that you can then go ahead, ask us the questions that you need, and we'll make sure that you remember all of this for the next 6 months. So he says, that's fine. So meanwhile, they're flying David back to Toronto. In Toronto, they show him that they could siphon the water with their device. They showed him that the problem we had with our water, and that we should clean it, and it's killing our trees and everything. Well, David wasn't too interested in that. He was mostly interested in the propulsion system of the device, the humming inside, the light. So he said, well, those are the questions that I have, and I'm going to keep asking these questions. He said, that's great, David. Flying back to Maple Ridge, BC. And while they're doing that, they're putting a lot of pictures about the pyramids and everything because they're saying that this information has been around for a long time. It's amongst the artifacts and so forth for in Egypt, for example, and around the world. So the technology I'm talking about right now, though sounds very high-tech, is extremely archaic. Archaic in a sense that simplicity itself talks about how we can create anti-gravity. And scientists now around the world are doing experiments, finally, turning around and start to look at the magnetic field as adding on magnetic fields together to make electricity. But now, totally the opposite is where we repel magnetic fields at vector angles. That means we wobble them together, or we move them dynamically, continuously, and then we enclose all of that. And what happens is a burst of energy. That burst of energy shows up in a change of color spectrum around the device, and also the device rises in the sky. Size and dimension is not important because the object itself loses weight, not mass, it loses weight. So let's carry on here. This is David Hamill's house there, and you can see that he has a machine already started there. This is about 1979. All of this, by the way, started to happen between 1975 and the end of 1977. So October 75, David is given the information. End of 77, 3 machines were built already, going through the whole process of prototypes, and 3 machines that worked already. Machine of fair importance, as you will see. Anyway, all the little machines were built in that little extension, the little garage there, and David had a house basically with the kitchen, the living room, and everything in the same, basically in the same room. So it was a very small house, and David had come back from the war years, so he didn't have much money. Now, you can see David here showing the principle. He calls it the wobble principle, the butterfly principle. It is not a free energy machine like they say on the internet right now. So the Hamill disk, the Hamill free energy device. This is just a principle. All it is to demonstrate the wobble effect inside the device. That means inside that big machine he was in. Now we're going to roll a tape here, and I'm going to show you what that wobble is. I made a prototype to show you what this wobble is like. Can we roll the tape? Now, here what you see is basically that big magnet that he has in his hand right there. Instead of me holding it, it's a little device holding it. The magnet does not rotate. As you can see, it's stationary. And that little magnet underneath there attached to a ball bearing is the one that's basically now running on the magnetic lines, or magnetic flux, because lines is not a real term, around that big magnet there. And this is the principle behind these machines. Not rotation, but wobble. And so people misunderstand that part of the machine where they say it's a free energy machine. We're going to stop that there, please. Thank you very much. When they say a free energy machine, and it's not. It's purely a principle. Let's move on. Here, there's some of the very, very early machines that David did in 75, 76 to understand what the movement and everything was. Basically, what David was trying to achieve is having these plates on top of each other, 3 plates, and what holds these plates basically is dividing shafts. So in between these plates, there's always a shaft there, and you can see the way they tumble, and the tumbling motion is the butterfly effect. And then what David is trying to create is basically have this tumble to continue on by itself mechanically. As he moved through these prototypes, there we can see it as he puts another plate on it. Those are very old pictures, so that's why they're a bit light there. As he put on these plates there, he has rollerblades, wheels, and all types of things. So it's absolutely basic, simple stuff that he was doing there, just trying to understand what the heck they were trying to tell him. Now imagine along the way, these guys are spiritually in the house, and they do things like, for example, they pull out an egg from the fridge, the egg flows in the air daytime, lands on the table, and basically he feels like he needs to take the egg and do something with it. Breaks the egg apart and realizes that the film inside the egg is basically the energy created inside the machine. But that wasn't enough. They continued on now at that point to take the peanut butter jar out of the fridge, on the table, and then the peanut butter would disappear. Okay, it sounds flaky and stuff like that, so that's not important. Let's look at the facts. Okay, so the peanut butter disappears, and what do we have left? Well, we have basically the jar, an empty jar. So we have the film of the egg for the energy. We have an empty jar to put the machine into it. So what does David do as he goes along? Well, then he started to understand that, okay, now I need to use a magnetic field. This magnetic field will cause this, and it needs to be into some type of an object for it to take place. So that's fine. So he went along, and here you can see that he made, that was a lot of work. But this work was very, very short because he understood quickly that this was not the way to go, because mechanically he could see now in his mind that he could move on to a magnetic model. And then so he made all types of little prototypes like this, hoping that this ball would continue to fall by itself, so tumble continuously as this wobble effect takes place in between the plates there. Something that comes back all the time is just 2 moving plates, and then a stable one at the top, stable one at the bottom. Here you can see that he moved on to a magnetic device now, and he uses a magnetic field to basically now having this repulsion as smooth as possible. Because if it's going to tumble by itself, it needs to be extremely smooth. So magnets were the way to go. Now he goes on to, imagine, David comes back from this experience, and his life changed totally. He doesn't do anything else than just that. Goes out there, buys some magnets, borrows some money from the bank, and then just go out and buy magnets and build prototypes. So this is another prototype that he built to try to understand what was going on. Now this one here is a prototype that he built on a trailer, and we're going to view this one inside. What this one was capable of doing is that, A, understand the principle, because David knew that when the prototypes are small, they're very hard to work with. The bigger they were, the easier they were it was to work with. So by doing that, the kids would come along on the weekend, and then he'd take off the top cap there, and the kids would come in and move the machine inside. And as they moved the machine inside, then the cars would stop on the road, the TV would go off, the fuse in the pole close to the transformer would blow, and of course they'd come out and tell the kids, well, look, you guys, just stop that. Anyways, this is the inside of the machine. Now, before we move on to the inside of the machine, it's too bad, I wish I would have had a drawing board, I forgot about that. David went and used a 45-gallon drum, emptied the 45-gallon drum, and then installed 3 inverted cones that stand on top of each other with the separating shaft there, metal shaft. And then, of course, then you'd have this wobble effect like you've seen previously. At the bottom of that 45-gallon drum, what you'd have is a moving plate on 3 ball bearings. And so at the very top of all of this, because it's all balanced magnetically now inside, because everything repels, then he puts a magnet where there's another one attached to the very top of these inverted cones there. And then what it does, it just offsets the whole thing. So it offsets all the cones, so they move sideways, and then they stop there. So David's a bit discouraged and looks at it, well, the darn thing's never going to work. Goes to sleep, 2 o'clock in the morning, the house is red. There's total red light coming out of the little garage where he'd put the 45-gallon drum. So Nora goes, says, fire, fire. So David runs through the house, opens the door, and he says, Pierre, he says, this huge amount of light, red light, would come out of the barrel. And then eventually what happens is the inside of the barrel just blew out. Now, look at this here. Magnets from Radio Shack, scrap metal from a scrap yard, 45-gallon drum, and the darn thing just blew up right there. So everything just went from the inside of the 45-gallon drum right through the ceiling inside the garage and exploded apart. He says, Pierre, the magnets, you should have seen the magnets flying away. There was nothing there that could cause that we know about. So what had he discovered? Well, when he found that, he said, well, okay, fine. So let's move on to other prototypes. And that's David's prerogative, I guess, and we could call it a quality as well, is that instead of fixing a prototype, he'd go on and build another one. Well, that's the second one he built. Here's the bowling ball here, rings of magnets there, which have got 3 little magnets with nails into it. And then what you have now is the base of that machine. So it's 8 feet in diameter. It's basically attached to a trailer, so you could move it in and out of the garage when it rains. And then so that cup there with that little ball would basically wobble. Second part that comes on top of that is this plate here. So this is plywood, 8 feet in diameter again. And underneath that piece of plywood there, you can see that there's the same amount of magnet underneath. So when, you put it on top there, it basically floats. And what keeps it in the center are these little cups there. One on top, one inverted, put the bowling ball into it, and then it just sits there and floats on the magnetic field. Okay, that's good. Let's move on to the next one. So that's how it looks like when it's in there. And then now you have to move on to do the other stage, because remember, we always have 3 moving objects, like 2 moving objects in the center, and then you have the cover one, the top one, the bottom one. So that's the upper part of this machine. Now that's the machine that stopped the cars in the road and then blew the fuses in the poles there where the transformer were. And then David said that when he worked into it, sometimes he would have his light to see how the things move inside, and the light would go on and off. Now that's really similar to all the claims that we hear from people that say, well, we saw a UFO, and it came close to the car stopped, the engine stopped. Well, we now have proofs on the bench that when you use this type of technology, that means bucking magnetic field at vector angles into an enclosed object, the electron movement, which means what carries on the electricity into a wire, just quits. It just stops. So he had discovered something that other people had seen as well, but this was nice because it correlated with David's research, which didn't have a background about this at all. He was a carpenter. Guy comes from the war years, he has a wife, carpenter, kaboom, this thing happens to him, kaboom, he builds anti-gravity machines. What the heck's going on? Now David is carrying on to cover it up because it needs to be covered. For the energy, you break a threshold inside, and then after that it just starts to glow, and then it goes in the air. But this machine here had the disadvantage of not being designed for self-sustaining itself. That means that the inside parts were not allowing the airflow for the machine to continue on to basically continue on building the energy. Because when you look at it, you have 2 principles. You have the mechanical principle that you're trying to achieve, and then when you've done that, the anti-gravitational principle, the energy level, then starts to flow inside the machine. The air replenishes it, keeps the machine in motion, and it just goes in the air. Now here, very rare picture. There's only 2 pictures of this machine. There's this one and the next one. This is not David Hamill, that's his brother-in-law. That's his sister there. And then this is the machine he built following the trailer one. Because he had success with the trailer one and the 45-gallon drum one, he says, well, hey, let's build another one. This one is the closest to what he had seen in that machine he was in. This is built with scrap aluminum from the backyard, magnets, plywood, and that's it. Now, let's move on to the next one. This, of course, David was aware that the self-sustaining movement would be there, so I'm going to stick a shaft in the middle of the machine, take it down to a plate, rotate a plate, take 2 plates of magnets of different polarity, put a coil in the center, rotate them, and make electricity. Now imagine the guy has a device that produces anti-gravity, and has a potential for propulsion going to anywhere we want, potential for electricity that would be like with no ends, and then yet he's looking for a basic principle of electromagnetism. Now, that's where you understand that David didn't have a clue of what was going on. He was basically executing the information that was given to him at the time. So, hey, that's great. It moves. It does all of this. But how do I make electricity? Who cares about the electricity? We have anti-gravity. Well, no, I want to have electricity. I want to run my house. OK, that's fine. So then he goes on and puts that thing in there. And then he wants to stick the shaft into there. And then he thought, well, there'll be vibration. So it'll move the plate. And then it'll move the magnets and make electricity. Well, before David has time to do that, what you can see at the top there is a garbage lid. It's made out of aluminum. Inside that lid there, what you have is a magnet. Remember the 45-gallon drum, the magnet pushing on top of the inverted cones? Same principle. You'll see that a little bit later. And then as David puts the top on it, nighttime, 1977, end of the year, puts the top on it, and then the machine starts changing color. Now he gets afraid, goes down the ladder, which was made out of wood because he was afraid of electricity, goes down the ladder, the lights out in the house because when the machine, starts running, the lights goes out, reaches out for the Brownie camera, comes outside and starts shooting at it because it was totally white and it had started to lift already. Now this thing weighs 400 pounds and it's 8 feet in diameter. Inside what you see there around is the airflow pattern, path for this, and then at the top the aluminum cap, and then of course with 3 screws. That's all he had in there. He says, well, I wanted to try it. So right away it started changing color, and then it lifted in the sky. So those are the pictures when it takes off. Now look at the pattern here. And then another thing you'll tell me, well, Pierre, why is the bottom flat when it was round on that machine there? Because it's not the machine totally that took off. It's the inside of the machine. He had built it inside so that people couldn't see what he was doing because he was planning to patent it. And of course realized he couldn't patent that anyway, so he just went on and told everybody. But that's why the bottom is flat. Now, that was a thing that was concerning me because I said, well, David, are those the pictures you took? Hey, look, Pierre, I'm telling you. Well, I said, why is the bottom flat? That's when he told me, well, because it's the inside that goes, not the outside. Then I thought, OK. And then it keeps going up. And this is because he's moving his camera, so it's not because it's stretching. But the funny thing about this is it takes off at 45 degrees, things he couldn't explain. And that just goes up. Now, little scratches you saw in there are not stars. It's just the scratches in the picture. And the why they were green is because it's a copy of a black and white into a color film. So that's why it was green. So imagine David says, geez, that was wonderful. But he was really annoyed. He was annoyed because he lost his magnets. Not because he had this anti-gravitational machine. The answer to a lot of scientists that they're looking for now. No. He lost his magnets. He says, darn, I'm not going to make another machine with magnets. I'm going to make it out of cement. And I'm going to put it to the ground. And there's not going to be any magnets in this one. Remember at the very beginning of his research, he was fascinated by the mechanical movement, whether he could create that ball to tumble all the time. Well, that's what he did. And then he came back to that. And then this time he wanted to run some alternators from GM's. So you can see the alternator there, the shaft, the belts. And then he continued on building this thing. And you can see inside there the alternator. The belts are there. And that plate was the one that's going to rotate with a shaft that basically would wobble with the tumbling movement of the inside of the machine. This is the upper part of the machine. This will be made out of filled with cement. And the ball will be right at the top there in that inverted cone. And then the shaft will be underneath and the plates. And you'll see the drawings of all of that. And then this thing would weigh 2 tons. This is the upper part now that's full of cement, inverted, and that is the shaft that will wobble with that little ball tumbling at the very top inside the machine. Now, this is without the parts inside, which you see the adjustment system here, so that he could actually move it in and out at the proper angle, so that the ball would just keep tumbling. I don't know which button to push anymore. And that's, you can see it right there, fairly heavy, 2 tons. And David, of course, had a problem because it was expensive to call in the crane to do that. So he could do only some tests at a time. This is David Hamill. Some of the newspapers he was in at the time, local newspaper, one of it carried the whole story. And you can see in there with the whole machine finished with the cables trying to run some electricity to the house. Calls everybody, come and look at this. So he had about 100 people in his backyard. And then they looked at it, and it went up. It moved a little bit, clunk, it stopped. And I asked David, well, why is that? Well, it says because it's very hard to balance the machine properly. And every time I would try to do that, I'd need the crane. So therefore, when it flipped, people thought, bah, it doesn't work. This is the inside of that machine. You can see the cement compartment there, which is slightly different because that's the way David does this. It makes a drawing and then changes it a little bit. And that's a tumbling ball that moves the plate and then wobbles this plate here, runs this shaft, and then turns this wheel, turn the alternator, and make electricity. That's the machine completed. And now, this is David Hamill in 1994 when he came to work with me in BC because I wanted to duplicate it. After doing the research for 6 years, I thought, well, okay, that's fine. Let's do two things. Let's make sure the story doesn't get lost with David's death, right? Because he's 72 years old. So let's write a book about this and let's tell people what it is. B, let's build a prototype to prove what he was saying. Why didn't David build another prototype? Because that's the type of man he is. He doesn't build other prototypes. It worked, that's great, wonderful, let's move on to different things. And so David had moved from Maple Ridge back to Toronto where he was taking two with the object there, bought a house there, and then started from scratch, and now he's building another one 10 feet in diameter. Finally, after all the pressure the book created and the attention around the world, he's finally decided to move ahead and do another one. So this is the one we worked together on, and this is an individual inverted cone, or a cone actually, excuse me, and we could, in this case there's really cones there, conical shapes, and these are filled with magnets all around. And this is David and me before he left there, and this is the AutoCAD drawings of the actual machine. This is to scale, and now that's the part that gets a little bit boring because there's a lot of information, so I'm going to try to go through as fast as possible. The tape will be available at the end so you guys can have it, and that's good. Okay, shows me 30 minutes. Okay, and let's look a little bit of how this thing works quickly. Is what we have here in the machine I've built based on David's information is that 4 satellite dishes sitting on top of each other, and basically what we have at the extremities of the satellite dish, magnet rings that are supposed to keep this in balance, like a magnetic bearing, and then magnetic rings as well at the extremities of these satellite dish to basically help them to repel slightly. What keeps them apart? Little cups here, and little double-sided cones, little double-sided cones right here, and these magnets with these and these also help to support some of that weight there because they weigh about 45 pounds each. At the very top there is basically a simple cranking mechanism. You crank it down. What it does, it offsets these magnets there. The cones, the satellite dish goes to the side, and then after that, it just sits there, and then suddenly, the energy just starts showing up. What happens? The energy level for the air starts to change. So basically, the spectrum starts to change, and what happens is there's a depletion of air inside the machine. What that does, it basically then starts to change color. So the energy level of the air starts to change, the machine starts to glow, there's a vacuum created inside the machine, the air then starts flowing around the object, goes up, hits the inverted cone, goes down, out in the holes, and then the machine is sustained. Because when the machine is offset, if you look at it inside three-dimensionally, it looks like a turbine. But we're not looking for airlift, we're looking for gravitational lift, which is really different and everything. This is the upper part of this machine. You can see the extremity of the magnets at the extremity there. And why we have this, because when you buy these satellite dishes, they have all types of little holes in them. You want to cover these holes because we're trying to control the flow of air inside the machine. Just close up to this. And then those are the places where we're going to be putting the little cups and the little balls there. Now, this is the prototype itself. That's what it looks like. It's about 7.5 feet in diameter. We can see the outer magnets there, the outer ring magnets that you just saw in the drawings. The satellite dish there, the ones that goes on top. And then the 2 ones here that are movable parts that goes on top of this one, and this one covers it all up. This is basically the frame that's required to hold that machine. You want it as straight as possible because the movement between the cones is not very big. It's about 1/4 of an inch. And this is here to show you a little bit of what it looks like on drawing before I show you really. You see the upper one that goes there is attached to the wall and to the base of the machine with the lower one. The 2 ones that moves are only those 2 ones there with these little extensions. What they do is they keep these magnets, because all the magnets are repelling in this machine, keep the magnets apart, hold them in the center till you then offset the machine with the upper magnet at the very top. What that does, it basically pushes these magnetic field, causing them to buck. And when they do that, they then go sideways and they shift. When they shift, then they become dynamic. When they become dynamic, the nuclei has been affected by that, and what you see out is not a shift in magnetic field, but a shift in gravitational field, because the byproduct of all of this is not a magnetic field, but a gravitational field. So this is here on the outside. You can see the extension there, where that part here will be attached down to and then covered all around. This is a better look at this towards the inside. You can see the extremity magnets there, and that's the first part, of course. Upper magnets at the collar, and then the inverted cones that goes into the center that's attached to the base of the machine. This is the outside look to look inside these rings. You can see the magnets are basically pushed in a channel all around the machine, forming a magnetic ring that has its magnetic field all pushing towards the center. That means all field are repelling, so all north-north or south-south. Then here, a close-up to the ring. You can see the ring sits inside here. It can be adjustable upward or lower, forward, or upward. And that is designed there so that it has to be fairly stable because you don't want too much movement. Like I said, we don't have much movement. And now here what we have is to look at the double-sided cones. What these double-sided cones are is basically they're there to do two functions. The first one is to keep them apart. The second one is when they fall to the side, they will lock them in place. That means it can't go any further, but it also allows it to rotate, so the wobbling movement can take place inside. And this is the little double-sided cones that I told you about. And we'll show you a bit better picture. These are attached at 120 degrees all around the machine. And here's a close-up, and you can see where they sit. So imagine that the next satellite dish sits right on top of that, and then you can see the little wobbling movement we can get there. It's not going to turn, but just wobble. This is, in a big view, what these things are, and I'll show you what the movement is as well later. And you can see how they sit inside with the top one on the top there. And then what you do is you attach that to a single satellite dish at the bottom and a single satellite dish at the top. And now suddenly you have two movable parts that can cause a wobbling motion and also lock so that they don't go any further, because you don't want to transcend the field either, the magnetic field. You don't want to go too far from it. This is a good view of what this looks like. You can see your upper magnets on the top part, on the collar, attached with inverted cones there. And that's the one I'm telling you, when you push down, it upsets these two ones there, and they shift sideways. And these little balls there are the ones that basically will allow that shift and also keep them inside. We didn't use double-sided cones in there because when you put a little bit of an angle in there, it causes also a slight lift as it wobbles. This is the closer view of the bottom one. And of course, we have a hole in here about 4 inch where the air actually is allowed to flow. So imagine that the air goes down, flows out here, and then out there and upward. This is the inside look of this particular satellite dish. Geez, it's hot in here. It's amazing, eh? You have the inverted cone here and the bottom magnet, of course, and that big hole I was just telling you about. It's a better look to it now. And now we're going to look at these wobbling little cups there. Now on the top of this, you can see that we have these little cups and the balls are in there. And then you can see that we cover everything because we want to control the airflow in that machine. And here's a close-up of that again. And don't look at the soldering joints because you don't want to warp it, so you just spot weld it. That's underneath there where you can see the inverted ones, where the two ones you saw now with a little ball in the center. And you can see the inverted cones as well with the collar magnet and the bottom magnet there. Okay, now we look at the two center cones. The reason why I showed you this is so you can see the extremity of the magnets around the channels there that are attached to the body of these two satellite dish. These two satellite dish sits inside there and that one on top of it. Okay, that's a strange one. Okay, here I did this so that you can see the distance between them where the air will be actually flowing inside the machine. Again, a closer look there, you can see the other dish right at the back there, the extremity magnets, and these ones there to keep them in the center. Now, before we go there, we're going to play that other section. The other piece of tape, please, we're going to play. Hello? Okay, what have we got there? Now, this is the actual movement of these two cones, two satellite dishes that you just saw there. There's no audio, don't worry about it. And look at the movement. So can you see the amount of movement? It's very minimal, but it's not necessary to have a big movement. When that takes place, then the energy starts to show, and then it just starts to rise in the sky. Of course, that I haven't been there already. I mean, I'm still completing the machine right now. But that's what the movement is about. Okay, Yes, that's it. Now let's stop it there, please. Thank you. Now this is the upper part, and we're almost at the end now, so don't worry. This is the upper part with the extension to be screwed on the top of these metal angles there. And this is, the top one doesn't have an inverted one because it's not necessary. The airflow is controlled in between the two middle ones. And this is a close-up to this to make sure that you see there, and you can see we cover all the air path. And that's a closer view. We're going to cover all of this as well. And that's the inside looking in. You can see that we have aluminum paper also blocking these holes because the compression of air inside is outward, not inward. Great, and that's the overview of the whole thing. Now let's look at a computer animation of this thing. Now keep in mind that the computer animation you're going to see has 3 satellite dish in there. Well, there's only 2. This was a computer animation I did at the very beginning to help people see in 3 dimensions what it was. So let's run the computer animation. This is a 2-dimensional view. They're cut right in the center. I don't know how bright this is. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And at the very top, you have the pressurized magnet there. That basically offsets the machine. Now we can see it in 3 dimensions. Well, we have our magnetic field on the surrounding. The cones coming down on top of it and on top of each other. And then we have, at the very top of that, we have the repelling magnet to offset everything. Then we cover it all up. Then at the very top of this, we have the cap. And then the pressurizing device to pressure. Basically, that magnet here repels the one that's just coming down now. And then when you push down, it offsets these satellite dish there, and you'll see around what happens. And you can see them moving now. It's just as simple as that. Nothing else. So now you have an anti-gravitational device. And the size is not the issue. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what this is about. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
How much time you got up there?
20 minutes.
They'll tell you
We
down
have 20
front.
minutes left. Yes.
Any questions for Pierre?
Go ahead.
We want to get him on the mic if there is any. Is there another mic yet also? Okay, back here. Come up here, John.
Is this something, am I on? Okay. Is this something you can, that we could get plans for to build ourselves or
Absolutely. On my table, by the way, you have order forms, and you can have the drawings. You just send me the order form, and they're cheap. I guess I sell them $6 for the set of drawings. And you just send me a check, and then I'll send it out to you as soon as I receive it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Okay. Mike back here.
Oh, by the way, before I leave here, on my table there, on the 5th table, I guess in the middle there, you can have, you can sample the products, the book and everything. And I can't sell the books here, but if you want to take an order form, I'm the distributor of the book and the videos, so you can go ahead.
Talk to me. Talk to me.
Okay.
Talk to me, please. On 1, 2, 3. I just check
The button, I guess. Okay.
Testing. There we go. You talked about the compressed air, the air inversion. Could you go over that again, please? Because I missed that.
Okay.
What's the importance of the air travel in that, please?
The importance of the air travel in it is to sustain its movement. That means imagine the machine is all mechanically placed and together, and then after that, it's offsetted because of the magnets being pressurized at the top. So everything goes on the side. And then it sits there for a little while, and then suddenly it energizes. Well,
Suddenly it energizes.
it suddenly energizes. That means that when you buck these fields there and you enclose everything like this, and you have the dynamic that you have inside the machine, what happens is that then suddenly the nuclei inside these magnets, we're using barium ferrite, by the way, the nuclei inside these magnets are basically activated. When they're activated, the byproduct of the activation of that is a gravitational field, which shows up as light and then also a lift. Second thing is that also there's a loss of temperature around the device as well that was told by David. So you have these two effects, and the byproduct of canceling these magnetic fields, instead of getting a magnetic wave, we're getting an electrogravitational wave, field outside the machine. And so when that happens, the air changes energy level. When the air changes energy level, it rarefies, because I mean it needs to transfer energy. It loses it in photons, rarefies. Then what happens? It needs to supply itself, so the outside air needs to go back in. and then it causes, when it goes back in and hits the inverted cones, then what happens, it causes them to offset and keep moving that way. And the machine just keeps replenishing itself, and kaboom, it goes in the air.
So a very
Now,
minor air pressure difference in around the...
absolutely. And this
said-
machine, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
This machine is also only a starter motor. This is not a thing to fly in. This was given to David so that you can put that onto a bigger machine that's built the same way. You start the small one, it activates the big one, and you control the big one with the small one. So that's how this works.
You said you started, did you mechanically start it by hand, or how does it?
At the very top of the machine, you start there's the mechanism that you just crank down. What it does, it pushes down the center magnet, and there's
okay.
another magnet underneath that's opposite field, and then it goes offset. And it stays there for a little while, and then suddenly it changes color, and then it activates itself.
Amazing, thank you.
David, I'm going to interrupt. There's other questions back there, but those pictures, I wonder if I got it straight. That was the pictures of it going up into the sky?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
when did it come back?
Never did, by the way.
Oh, that's what I
That's
thought
why
you
it was
said.
so bad. It was so mad. Yes.
Did the other gentleman get the application together for for energy production? Did he ever produce energy with his other machine?
The mechanical ones?
The guy with the concrete unit.
No. David Hamill, he built it, and then just at the end that he built it, he sold his house. So he just took the top off and left. But he was never able to get it to continuously tumble mechanically. Because you see, David was trying to use part of the information he'd been given to do something else. When the actual idea behind David's story, that's why the study was so long, was that you take it as a package, and that's what you need to start. Don't take a bit of it and try it, but take it as a package. And I also warn the researchers out there, they all try to make a little table model. You know, if you're going to waste your time and money, just, don't even look at the project. But if you're going to do it the proper size right away, and it'll work.
Question down here.
One last question.
Yep.
I don't quite understand the air flow between the discs. What is the air flow? Does it the unit need air to feed it?
Yes, the unit to self-sustain the movement, not the energy, because the energy comes from the magnet. So that's not what the energy is. The energy sustains itself because of the air flowing inside the machine that then hits the inverted cone. And basically what it does, it causes these satellite dish inside the movable ones to basically just to keep tumble like this.
What, because of the density of the air, or because of?
Because of the air flow inside. So imagine the air flows up, downward, but when it goes downward, there's actual mechanical pressure from the air there.
The density.
It hits it, and then what it does, it then continue on.
It's like a turbine, you said.
Absolutely. It's a turbine inside. That's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is David Hamill. He was contacted by beings from another
Yes.
planet, another dimension. How do
Unfortunately.
you explain that?
Okay. Well, at the beginning, when they came to see David, they said, well, David, we'll come to see you back in 3 months at your house. So 3 months later, knock on the door. The three of them were there. The two guys were there, and the third one that was in the machine, well, they came to see him. And then this time, they didn't want to talk to David. They wanted to talk to his wife. Now imagine his wife is quadriplegic. She can't speak. And then they come in the house. David realizes that they want to talk to his wife. Didn't have to talk to them. Understood that. They walk towards Nora. She's in her bed. And he says, Pierre, for 2 hours, my wife speaks like you and me. I'm trying to go outside to see if I can have someone so we can prove this thing. There's no one. Everybody's at work. So, and my wife is speaking. They leave, back where she was. I give them a coffee. I look at them. They drink the coffee. I go back when they leave. Coffee's still full. So, what really happened? What really happened? You'll say, okay, fine, it's just a spiritual encounter. But then, we look at the prototypes, and they're not spiritual. They're real. I have witnesses that went in the garage and saw the shingles broken off there.
See, that's what I'm trying to get. Were they from another planet, or were they multidimensional? What are we looking at here?
Well, we're looking at two different concepts. If we deal with the one where they came physically to the house, they are like you and me. If we deal with the one where he went in the machine, they can do things spiritually that we can't. But when he was in the machine, they actually gave him a donut of some kind with a cord that goes to a screen, and he puts it on himself, and he says, I could see through myself on the screen.
One moment, Kaz. Is David Adair in the room? No, he's in the bar. Oh. I wanted him to tell the applications he found. Okay, go ahead, Kath.
Okay, two questions. One, talking about the air compression running the turbine.
Yes.
So then this is for earthbound only, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And then the second is, as far as the magnets go, are they mixed poles or unipole?
Nope. They're all basic ceramic 5 magnets that we find in little speakers, and they have the magnetic poles in through them. That means the south and the north on either side.
And so they have specific direction and way they're supposed to be placed?
Yes, they do. They're all repel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here, we got one.
How do they control coming down and going up again?
Okay, this machine was only a prototype to understand the field itself. Then, what is our job is to take that and then make the necessary changes to control it. So that's what it was given for. When they gave it to David, they said, David, this technology, and don't go thinking that the Earth's going to break or that something's going to happen, but the reason why they gave it to him, and I just can't relate the information to you, is that they said, David, we want you to have that information so you guys can levitate yourselves from the grounds while the changes are taking place. So that means they could have some earthquake and things like that, where there'll be like tsunami waves and things like that. And they wanted us to have the technology to raise ourselves from the ground, stay there while it takes place, and then go back where there's land. So that's the only reason why he gave the technology.
See, Elaine, the point was, you see, it went up, but they never figured out how to make it come back down.
Any more questions?
Not yet.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
He was told to use granite stones, and he was actually sent to Gilmore, Ontario, because I did speak to him. And there's like a big pile of granite stones behind his house.
Yes.
Now, were any of these granite stones utilized in the development of the most recent?
Very much so. He just paid $10,000 to have these little granite pieces made to put inside the machine. Because David said the machine he was in was made out of granite. And when they flew him back to Toronto in 1975 in Gilmore, Ontario, they said, where we're hovering right now, there's lots of granite, and there's gold as well on that piece of land. So you'll need that gold to buy the granite, and you'll need the granite to build the machine. So then they bring him back to BC. When David goes back, sells his house, goes back, he finds a house, and the house is where he had hovered with the machine. Now, I wanted to prove that because I'm that type of guy. I do lots of research, and I just want to prove what I'm talking about. He says that behind there where they hovered, there was a little shack, and the people that drank a lot and stuff went in that shack, and they cooked and they sleep there because they didn't have any money. So I thought, oh, okay. So he comes and takes me to the shack, and then we start looking around. I had my camera at the time, and what we found under the root of a tree, a very old bottle of alcohol. So why was he saying that? He hadn't been there very long. And the bottle was very old because the tree was probably about 18 years old now. And the roots, you could see the roots right on top of the bottle. And believe me, he didn't put it there because I'm the one who took it out. So it's just to show you that there's a lot of correlation in the story. And though it sounds like all the UFO stories that we hear about, this one tends to make a little more sense somehow for me.
Did Pierre talk fast enough for you? Now, on the basis of what you know now, I would like a show of hands. This is not committing you to the ends of the earth, but if you would like to have a workshop, attend a workshop that Pierre would offer tonight at about 9:30 or after the last presentation tonight. If you do, we'll try to line something up. We'll assign a room. If there's enough interest, this is what the purpose of this is. Is there anybody here who would like to take a workshop tonight from and count the hands, if you will, Jay, and
Now,
Clarence, count them over there, will you?
You guys are wondering about what we could talk in the workshop tonight. I brought some videos. I wasn't supposed to make one, so I didn't bring much stuff. What we're going to be talking tonight in the workshop is basically a little bit more a correlation of who other researchers are working on this type of field. I brought some videotapes as well of what that research is about and what it does. And then also we can overview a little bit more of what we've talked about. Of course, I find it a boring subject. Really, when you talk about it for an hour, geez, how can you impose this to people? But if you are interested, I have no problem talking about it at all.
We got a total of about 20 hands. If you want to do that, go out and tell them to fix up a sheet out there. Would you take care, have somebody do that? Jay, have them put out a sheet and sign up for it right now, if you wish, or soon. And now be back here in about 8 minutes, because there's another message.